The Nevada desert stretched wide and empty under a burning sky, its silence broken only by the crack of rifles echoing across the range. Elena Vargas carried a bundle of torn paper targets under her arm, dust clinging to her boots as she trudged between the wooden frames. She wasn't a soldier, not really. Her badge read Range Assistant, and her job was simple: replace targets, sweep brass, make sure the shooters had what they needed. Nothing glamorous, nothing dangerous. But the men training here weren't ordinary shooters. They were SEALs, hardened warriors flown in to sharpen their already lethal edge. And Elena, barely 20, with no combat patch or medals, was invisible to them, or so she thought. She ducked as a sniper round cracked over her head, whistling into a target 30 yards to her left. The impact splintered wood, sending fragments flying. She froze. "Hey!" One of the instructors barked from the line. "Range not clear." Her cheeks burned. She lifted the shredded targets in one hand. "Sorry," she shouted back, her voice cracking. The SEALs chuckled, low and dismissive. One leaned on his rifle, shaking his head. To them, she was a clumsy kid, fumbling around where professionals worked. She wanted to shrink into the dust. But then, a voice cut through the laughter. Calm, controlled. "Hold up." A tall SEAL in desert camo walked forward, his rifle cradled easily in his arms. His face was partly hidden behind sunglasses, but his presence was unmistakable. He moved with a weight that drew silence. The others straightened, their smirks fading. Elena swallowed hard. He stopped in front of her, lowered the rifle, and extended it toward her. The weapon was long, sleek, heavy with the unmistakable aura of precision death. "Ever fired one of these?" he asked. The question stole the air from her lungs. She blinked, looking from the rifle to the man, then back again. "No, sir. I'm just the range assistant," one of the SEALs muttered behind them. More laughter followed, but the tall one didn't smile. He waited, steady, the rifle still outstretched. "Take the shot," he said simply. Her hands trembled as she touched the weapon. It was heavier than she imagined. The SEAL guided her toward the firing line, his tone patient, not mocking. "Breathe. Slow. Watch your trigger pull." The world around her blurred. Dust, sweat, and laughter faded until there was only the rifle pressed into her shoulder, the scope bringing the distant target close. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She squeezed. The rifle boomed, kicking back against her. The recoil nearly knocked her flat, but through the haze she saw the paper target, perfectly split at center mass. The line went silent. The SEAL smiled faintly, almost hidden beneath his stoic expression. "Not bad," he murmured. And just like that, everything changed. The range buzzed with unease. Elena set the rifle down carefully, her hands still shaking. She could feel the eyes of every SEAL on her, not with the usual dismissive amusement, but something sharper. Curiosity. Calculation. One of the men finally broke the silence. "Lucky shot." The others chuckled in agreement, but there was hesitation in it now. Even doubt. The tall SEAL stepped closer, his gaze locked on Elena. "Luck doesn't group rounds," he said. Then, with a slow grin that sent a ripple through the men, he added, "I bet she can do it again." A chorus of protests erupted. "Come on, Chief. She's a civilian. She'll flinch this time. No way she can repeat that under pressure." Elena wanted to disappear. Her pulse hammered in her throat, every instinct screaming that she didn't belong here. But the Chief, as they called him, ignored the noise. He reset the rifle on its bipod, slid another round into the chamber, and gestured to the scope. "Take the shot." Her throat was dry. "What if I miss? Then you'll know what you need to work on." His voice was calm, commanding. Not cruel, not indulgent, but firm, as though he expected her to rise to the challenge. She lowered herself to the ground again, the rifle fitting awkwardly against her frame. She inhaled, exhaled. The scope centered on the fresh target, heat waves shimmering between them. The laughter from before rose again, but now it felt different, strained, defensive. "Let's see it, range girl. Bet she can't even find the target." Her finger found the trigger. She remembered his words. Breathe. Slow. Watch your trigger pull. The rifle cracked. The target jerked with a clean punch through the bullseye. The laughter died instantly. Elena blinked, stunned. She'd done it again. The chief leaned down so only she could hear. You don't belong behind the line anymore. You belong on it. His words struck deeper than the recoil. For years she had been invisible. The assistant, the errand runner, the girl who wasn't good enough to be where the real soldiers stood. But in that moment, under the desert sun, she realized something terrifying and exhilarating. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe she did belong here. Behind them, the SEALs muttered in disbelief. Their world subtly shifted. A bet had been made, and a line had been crossed. The girl with torn paper targets wasn't just a background shadow anymore. She had taken a shot, and it had landed. The whispers didn't stop after the second shot. For the rest of the afternoon, Elena moved between the target frames and the brass piles, but the air around her felt different. The SEALs no longer ignored her. Their eyes followed her movements, lingering with a mix of suspicion, irritation, and maybe, just maybe, respect. But one thing was certain. They weren't going to let it slide. When she returned to the firing line to collect torn targets, one of the younger SEALs, a broad-shouldered man with a smirk too sharp for his own good, called out, "Hey, range girl, you think you're one of us now? 2 lucky shots don't mean squat out here." The others chuckled, low and rough. Elena froze, the paper crinkling in her hands. "I didn't say I was one of you," she muttered, heat rushing to her cheeks. But the smirker wasn't finished. He pointed to the farthest target on the ridge, a steel plate nearly 1,200 meters away. The Nevada heat made it shimmer like a mirage. "Prove it. Hit that." Her stomach dropped. That distance was no joke. Even she knew that. And she wasn't a sniper. She was a civilian with barely 10 minutes of trigger time. The men chuckled again, the tension electric. This wasn't about a shot anymore. This was about proving her place, or putting her back in hers. Before she could stammer out a refusal, the chief's voice cut in. "She doesn't need to prove anything." The smirker laughed. "Come on, Chief. If she's good enough, she can show us. If not, no harm done. Right, boys?" The others muttered agreement. A dangerous grin spread across their faces. They wanted to show. Elena felt trapped between them, caught in a world she had never been meant to enter. Her hands tightened on the paper targets. I can't hit that," she said, voice low. But the chief stepped forward, his calm gaze holding hers. "You can." She stared at him. "It's impossible." "Nothing's impossible," he said evenly. Then he handed her the rifle again. The men backed away, muttering. The smirker folded his arms, certain of victory. "She'll miss by a mile." Elena's pulse hammered as she lay down, the rifle heavy and foreign. She peered through the scope, the steel plate wavering in the heat. She couldn't steady her breath. Sweat rolled down her temples. The chief crouched beside her, voice low and steady. "Forget them. It's just you and the shot. Adjust for wind. Trust the scope. Trust yourself." She swallowed hard. Her finger trembled on the trigger. The rifle cracked. For a split second, silence. Then, the faintest clang rang across the desert as the bullet smacked the steel dead center. The line erupted. Some cursed, some cheered, some simply gawked. Elena sat up, stunned. She had done it. The smirker's grin vanished. He muttered something under his breath and turned away, the others jeering at him. But Elena barely heard them. Her chest heaved with something she had never felt before, a strange, intoxicating mix of fear, pride, and belonging. The chief smiled faintly. "Told you." That night, she couldn't sleep. Her hands still shook when she closed her eyes, the echo of the shot replaying in her mind. Somewhere deep inside, a door had opened, and behind it was a truth she had always feared to believe. Maybe she was meant for more. The next morning, the range came alive before dawn. Elena dragged herself out of bed, exhausted but buzzing, her body pulled by nerves she couldn't quiet. As she walked toward the training area, she spotted the SEALs gathered in a tight circle. Their voices were hushed, sharp, carrying the weight of something serious. She hung back, unsure if she should even approach. But then she caught pieces of their conversation. Words like extraction, enemy fire, and casualties. Her breath caught. These weren't just training drills anymore. These men were preparing for something real. The chief noticed her standing at the edge. His expression gave nothing away, but his voice carried. "Vargas, you're with me." Her heart skipped. "With you." He nodded. "We're moving out. You'll assist with gear, logistics, comms. Nothing dangerous." But the look in his eyes told her otherwise. He wasn't shielding her from danger. He was testing if she could face it. Hours later, Elena found herself crammed into the back of a dusty transport vehicle, the SEALs around her silent, weapons loaded, eyes sharp. Her pulse thundered. This wasn't a firing line. This was combat. When the convoy reached the outskirts of a ruined village, the air thickened with tension. The streets were quiet, too quiet. Then it began. Gunfire ripped through the air, slamming into the walls of the convoy. The vehicle lurched to a stop. SEALs spilled out, returning fire, their movements sharp and precise. Elena ducked low, heart hammering, clutching the radio pack she'd been told to carry. Bullets snapped past, dust kicking up around her boots. "Vargas," the chief's voice roared. "Get down." But then she saw it. A wounded SEAL lying in the open, blood pooling beneath him, his weapon just out of reach. She didn't think. She ran. Bullets screamed overhead as she dropped beside him, dragging him by his vest toward cover. Her arms burned, her lungs screamed, but she didn't stop. "Hang on," she gasped. "I've got you." The chief covered her with precise bursts, his expression unreadable even in the chaos. When she finally dragged the wounded man behind a crumbling wall, he coughed, grimacing in pain. "Didn't think range girl had guts," he muttered weakly. Elena's hands shook as she pressed bandages against the wound, her ears ringing with gunfire. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to matter. But she did. As the firefight raged on, she realized the truth. The paper targets, the laughter, the humiliation, it had all been preparation for this. For the moment she would step out of the shadows and prove she wasn't just an assistant. She was a fighter. The firefight didn't end quickly. Elena had thought, foolishly, that the SEALs would cut through the ambush in minutes the same way they cut through steel at the range. But combat wasn't neat, and it wasn't predictable. The enemy wasn't standing still on a paper frame. They were everywhere, hidden in alleys, on rooftops, behind broken doors. And for the first time, Elena understood what war really sounded like. The whistle of rounds passing inches from her ear. The deep, chest-thudding boom of grenades. The short, urgent shouts of men who lived on the edge of death every single day. "Vargas. Radio." The chief's order snapped her out of her daze. She fumbled with a headset, her hands trembling as she relayed coordinates, her voice cracking. "Copy. Copy. They're calling in support," she gasped, not sure if she was speaking to herself or to the bleeding man at her feet. "Keep your head down." Another SEAL barked, shoving her lower behind the rubble. But the chief shook his head. "She's fine. Let her work." It was the strangest thing. In that chaos, Elena felt something solid under her shaking. A focus. A purpose. She wasn't shooting, wasn't leading, wasn't saving the whole squad. But she was holding one small piece of the chain together. When the radio crackled back, confirming air support, she nearly collapsed from relief. Minutes later, the sky tore open. Jets screamed overhead, dropping ordnance with terrifying precision. The ground shook, the air seared hot, and Elena pressed herself flat as shockwaves rolled through the ruins. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of flames and the groans of wounded. The SEALs moved fast, sweeping the area, securing what was left of the village. Elena, heart still pounding, crawled back to the man she had dragged to safety. He was pale but alive, thanks to the pressure she had kept on his wound. "You're tougher than you look," he muttered, wincing as she adjusted the bandage. Her laugh was broken, shaky. "Don't tell me that. I'm still shaking like a leaf." But when she looked up, the chief was watching her with a quiet intensity. He gave the faintest nod, Not praise, not comfort, but acknowledgement. That night, back at the base, Elena sat apart from the others. Her hands still smelled of gunpowder and blood. She tried to eat, but every bite turned to ash. One of the younger SEALs dropped into the seat beside her, the same man she dragged. His arm was bandaged, his face pale, but his grin crooked. "You saved my life," he said simply. Elena shook her head. "I just pulled you behind a wall." He leaned closer. "That wall was the difference between me breathing and me bleeding out. Don't sell yourself short." For the first time, the laughter she heard from the others wasn't mocking. It was warm, inclusive. She was part of something now. But as she lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, Elena knew the day had changed her forever. The rifle shot on the range had opened a door. The firefight in the village had shoved her through it. And now, there was no going back. Days blurred into each other after the ambush. Elena wasn't dismissed back to her range assistant duties. The SEALs didn't say why, but she knew. They were watching her, testing her. The chief gave her odd assignments, double-checking ammo crates, learning field medical basics, running radio drills until her throat went raw. It felt cruel at times, exhausting, but she also knew it was deliberate. They weren't letting her slip back into the shadows. Then came the second test. The squad was sent to escort a convoy through mountain passes known for ambushes. Elena begged to be left behind, but the chief was blunt. "You've already seen combat. You're coming. And this time, you're carrying more than a radio." He handed her a rifle. Her stomach twisted as she gripped the weapon. It felt heavier than the world. I'm not ready." His reply was ice. "You'll never feel ready. None of us ever did." The convoy wound through jagged canyons under a pale morning sun. Dust kicked up behind the armored trucks, visibility low. Elena sat in the back seat of one, knuckles white around the rifle. Every shadow looked like danger. Every rock looked like a sniper's nest. When the ambush came, it was sudden and brutal. RPGs streaked from the cliffs, slamming into the lead vehicle. The explosion rattled her teeth. Gunfire rained down for both sides. "Out! Out!" someone shouted. The SEALs poured from the trucks, returning fire with calm precision. Elena stumbled after them, diving behind cover. Her chest heaved, the rifle slick in her hands. "Vargas," the chief's voice thundered. "Cover the left." Her heart nearly stopped. He wanted her to fire. She peeked over the rock. Shapes moved along the ridge, muzzle flashes spitting fire. Her fingers shook on the trigger. Then she remembered the steel plate, the impossible distance, the chief's voice steady beside her. "Trust yourself." She squeezed. The rifle barked, the recoil slamming into her shoulder. One of the figures on the ridge crumpled. A rush of disbelief and terror shot through her veins. She had hit. She had actually hit. There was no time to think. She fired again and again, the echoes of her shots mingling with the controlled bursts of the SEALs. The enemy fire faltered, then broke, retreating back into the rocks. When the canyon finally fell silent, Elena lowered the rifle, her hands trembling. She had fired to kill. She had survived. The chief approached, scanning her face. "How do you feel?" She wanted to say sick, terrified, broken, but the words that came out surprised even her. "Alive." For a long moment, he studied her. Then, for the first time, he smiled. The others didn't laugh at her anymore. They slapped her back, muttered grudging respect, even asked about her shooting. She wasn't just a range girl now. She was one of them. But deep inside, Elena wondered, had she crossed a line she could never uncross? The rifle felt heavier than ever. Respect in the SEAL team didn't come with applause. It came in silence, in a way they no longer questioned Elena's presence. They gave her tasks without hesitation, covered her flank in firefights, and even shared rations without comment. She thought she wanted that acceptance, but with it came a heavier weight. She had taken a life. That fact haunted her nights. She could still see the figure collapsing on the ridge, the way her bullet had ended everything in an instant. No training manual prepared her for that. No amount of respect erased the guilt. The chief must have seen it in her eyes. "You carry it, don't you?" he asked one night, as they cleaned weapons by the dim glow of a lantern. She hesitated. Does it ever get easier? His silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, softly, no. And that's the point. If it gets easy, you've lost yourself. The words sank deep. She realized the SEALs didn't just carry rifles or missions. They carried ghosts. The next mission came quickly, as if the war itself didn't care about her soul-searching. A high-value target had been located in a fortified compound on the edge of the desert. The team was tasked with infiltration and extraction. Elena's role was supposed to be minimal: assist with comms, monitor the perimeter. She tried to tell herself she would stay in the background. But deep down, she knew the war had a way of pulling her forward. The insertion went smoothly at first. Under cover of night, they moved across the sand, shadows within shadows. Elena's heart pounded with every step, but she kept pace. Inside the compound, things unraveled. The target's guards were more numerous than expected, better armed. Gunfire erupted, shouts pierced the night. The SEALs moved like water, flowing through the chaos, but they were pinned down. Perimeter breach, someone yelled through the radio. Elena spun. Figures were closing in from the dunes, cutting off their escape route. Her hands shook as she gripped the rifle. The chief's voice came through the headset. Vargas, it's on you. Hold them back. She froze. On her. Alone? But there was no time to protest. The attackers were seconds away. She dropped to the sand, steadied her breathing, and took aim. The first shot cracked through the night, dropping a man mid-sprint. Another fell. The recoil slammed her shoulder, but she didn't stop. Her training, her instincts, everything sharpened into focus. Behind her, the SEALs were moving, dragging the target toward the extraction point. Every second she bought them mattered. Every round she fired was a thread in the rope of survival. When the last of her ammo clicked empty, silence fell again. Her ears rang, her chest burned, but the attackers lay scattered in the sand. The chief's hand clamped her shoulder as he passed. Good work. You just saved the mission. The words filled her with pride, but also fear, because she realized something chilling. The more she fought, the more the war claimed her. The mission succeeded. The target was captured, the team extracted with minimal losses. Back at base, the mood was triumphant. The men laughed, clapped each other on the back, and even raised a toast in Elena's honor. You're one of us now, one said, handing her a canteen. She smiled weakly, but inside she felt hollow. She remembered who she had been just weeks before, a simple range assistant, stacking targets, ignored and underestimated. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone who had pulled a wounded man to safety, faced ambushes, and pulled a trigger that ended lives. The chief sought her out as dawn painted the horizon. You did good, he said. Better than anyone expected. Elena's throat tightened. But at what cost? He studied her quietly, then spoke words she would never forget. The uniform doesn't make you. The rifle doesn't make you. Choices do. You chose to stand when you could have hidden. That's who you are. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. I don't know if I can keep doing this. He nodded. Then don't. Go home. Live. You've already proven more than most ever will. For the first time, the idea of walking away didn't feel like weakness. It felt like strength. When the Black Hawk lifted off days later, carrying her back toward the world she had left behind, Elena looked down at the desert one last time. The war would go on without her. The SEALs would fight their battles. But she had fought hers, and won something far more valuable than medals or titles. She had discovered herself. Back home, when people laughed at the idea of the range girl who once stood among SEALs, she only smiled. Because she knew the truth. She had carried a rifle when it mattered. She had stood her ground when life tested her. And though the world might never know her story, she carried it inside her like a quiet flame, one that would never die.